Today on TFL Bike, we are talking about something happening here in Colorado with a particularly controversial topic, as always, in the motorcycle industry, and that is lane splitting.
Yeah, this is a big one. This is a topic that people love to debate on the internet. I'm sure the comment section is going to be fun to look at, a little crazy in this video, but definitely drop us all your thoughts in the comments below. Let us know what you think on this. But Colorado is at least starting the process of maybe allowing lane splitting.
They're looking into it.
A lot of maybes in there.
Yeah, exactly. Now, it seems like we're further along in making progress towards at least researching the topic of lane splitting and how it would work, how it would fare here in Colorado. But before we dig into that with an expert on the subject, which is Scott O'Sullivan from Rider Justice, we want to talk a little bit about lane splitting and the difference between lane splitting and lane filtering, because those two are very different.
Yeah, and a lot of people get them confused a lot. So lane splitting is what most people think of, I think, when they think of lane splitting or filtering, which is you're on a motorcycle and you're riding between lanes of moving traffic. So the cars around you are not fully stopped. And currently, this is only legal here in the US in California, and it's legal in most of Europe except for Germany. Germany only allows filtering. And filtering is pretty much the same thing. You're riding between lanes of stopped traffic, but that's the key word there is stopped traffic. So filtering, traffic is at a standstill. You're trying to get to a red light and be the front of the pack. And with lane splitting, traffic is moving, and in places like California, they have set speeds. I think it's like you can't be going more than 10 miles an hour faster than traffic, and if traffic is over like 40 miles an hour, you can't do it at all.
Yeah, so there are limitations to even lane splitting, which is something that even a lot of people don't appreciate just that fact alone. They think that lane splitting means you can have stopped traffic and a motorcycle buzzing by 70 miles per hour between these cars that aren't moving. That's not at all the case. That would be breaking the law just as much as if you were to do that in a state where it's not legal at all. So there are major limitations on lane splitting, and even more limitations on lane filtering. And lane filtering is actually legal in more places here in the US. And even just lane filtering, there's a lot of potential advantages to that. So one of them being the risk of a rear-end collision. So say you are stopped at the end of a line of cars waiting at a light. Maybe a car is coming up behind you. They don't see you. They run into the back of you. You would mitigate that danger by being able to scoot up toward the front of traffic. You would also reduce traffic congestion in general because you're able to move independent of the way that car traffic is moving. So instead of you acting essentially as another small car that's in addition to the traffic that's already there, you can move independently of it. So it's got benefits, obviously, to riders, but it also has benefits to people in cars.
Yeah, I mean, you'll hear that when we talk to Scott, but there's advantages for everyone on the road, and a lot of this boils down to education, right? Like in California, they know motorcyclists are coming, and I think that's one of the big reasons it hasn't taken off in a lot of other places is just because you got to inform the public, and there's a lot that goes into that, as you'll hear in a second. But yeah, the main advantage to this is safety. Its rear-end accidents are pretty brutal for a motorcycle. You've got a car that, on the best side of it is like, 3,000-4,000 pounds. On the worst side of it, you're talking semi-trucks running up on the back of you that could weigh 50,000 pounds, which obviously is going to end very badly if you're on a motorcycle. So yeah, the number one thing is getting out of the way of traffic that's coming towards you. And then there's other, side advantages that come with it, like freeing up traffic, getting places more quickly, keeping the bike cooler if you're on like an air-cooled bike or something and not sitting in traffic.
Now, to be clear, those are the main theoretical advantages. How that would actually shake out here in Colorado, in a place where that law hasn't existed like it has in Europe for a long time, is part of what this potential study is looking toward answering. But there are also obviously potential disadvantages to it. If you are lane splitting on a bike, it can upset motorists, especially if motorists, again, are not used to that being a thing. So you have the potential of more road rage incidents. Also, if you're lane splitting, you are riding inevitably close to other vehicles. Your handlebar end is not going to be all that far off of the vehicle next to you. And already motorists don't see us. It's an issue, as we all very well know. If you're coming down the center of a lane and a motorcycle or in a motorist is not expecting that, then there's the potential that with that speed differential, they might suddenly change lanes into you and not realize that you're there, which I guess is a risk that exists one way or another. But that there's potential safety advantages, but there's also potential safety disadvantages.
Yeah, and you're exactly right. I mean, yes, you're taking out that, or not taking out, but you'd be sort of reducing your risk that you'd get into a rear end accident, but then you're probably increasing your risk of getting sideswiped because, like you said, you're
just going to pass more cars.
You're passing more cars, and you're a lot closer to them than you would be if you're riding, let's say, in the number 2 or the center lane position in your full lane.
Yeah, I mean, just logically speaking, if you are fully in a lane and a car starts changing lanes into you, you should have more time to react because you won't be as close to them when they start changing direction than if you were in between lanes and a car starts changing lanes into you because they don't see you.
Yeah, and the other big thing to take into account is like our safety laws that we already have here in Colorado. For example, protective gear. Colorado doesn't require you to wear helmets. So maybe that's a step that needs to be taken before lane splitting because if you're going to be that much closer to cars, you probably should be in the correct protective gear. And that's, what this study is going to be all about, hopefully, is figuring out every little piece of data, because if you go online and look into lane splitting, there's a decent amount of information out there, but a lot of it is like 15 years old or 20 years old, and a lot of it comes from Europe, and they have very different roads than we have here in the States. So, the study needs to be done. We need this info.
So to learn a little bit more about the legal aspect of this lane splitting debate, we have here Scott O'Sullivan. And when you see at the beginning of our video, the card that says Rider Justice, that is Scott's organization. That's his team. So Scott O'Sullivan has been supporting the biker community for over 25 years, including helping injured riders, nonprofit board leadership, motorcycle events, sponsorships, and free legal advice. So additionally, over the past few years, Scott has also been working with Colorado legislators to pass laws, including laws against distracted driving. So you're heavily invested in, especially here in Colorado, everything legal that's going on with the motorcycle world.
Yeah, from start to finish, to celebrating it, trying to make it safer. And then unfortunately, when bad things happen, we're there to help out as well, both in front and in the courtroom. So, but more importantly for us, it's the celebration, and it's also trying to really make roads safer for all riders.
So when it comes to this topic in particular and what's happening here in Colorado, what it is not exactly a bill being proposed to change the law to allow lane splitting, but rather a study, right?
Yeah, the law that's being proposed now in the Colorado legislature, and it just passed the Housing and Transportation Committee, is a bill to study the feasibility of allowing lane splitting in the state of Colorado. It made it out of that committee, which is great. That's the first time this bill, anything close to this, has passed that. And I think it's a good first start for Colorado to try to figure it out and look at what's around in our surrounding states and maybe even around the world to try to get a real feeling of how does this actually help with safety, especially for motorcycle riders to get hit in traffic while waiting and getting hit from behind by distracted drivers.
Yeah, well, and especially because whether or not you support lane splitting, it's just good to have the information on it. Now, of course, for the government, they have to decide, how much money do they want to invest in that better understanding of that as a subject. But for us as motorcyclists, again, whether or not you support lane splitting, it would just be good to have more up-to-date statistics that are specific to our country, because a lot of that is kind of hard to find. And I know you've seen some statistics that have come out of Europe, which is really at this point the best way that we can gauge how it would affect us.
Yeah, it looks like the stats that I was taking a look at today show that it's less than 1% of riders who are injured in Europe are as a result of lane splitting. So obviously all lives matter, but it's still a very small percentage of actually what happens to riders. And I think that's important to know. It looks like the National Highway Transportation Association is also our safety administration is trying to look at this issue too, and thinks it's worth looking at because, as you guys know, as riders, when you pull up in traffic, you're making a choice. Do you want to be visible on the left hand here so that if something does happen, you hear it, you can scoot between the two cars in front of you, or you want to be on the right hand side to do that? And so we're always looking for exit options in any kind of traffic situation we're in. And that's just sort of a natural extension of it, whether you believe in lane splitting or not. We're already trying to figure out those exits wherever we ride, right? So having a little more stats on rear ending and things like that, I think are really important.
Yeah, and California right now is, I believe, the only state in the US that's allowing lane splitting. So looking at their data, how similar do you think that is to what we'd see in Colorado? Like, are those numbers translatable over to our roads here, or is it such a different place that you can't even look at those numbers and we need our own set of data here?
I know you're a national so I'll leave the jokes about it. Is it a different place aside? But I think what people try to infer from the data in California is that once lane splitting became fully legal, the number of fatalities from being rear-ended as a motorcyclist went down in a fairly significant way. And I think that's a good indication of the fact that they're not sitting in that LA bumper to bumper traffic. I mean, there's all sorts of things we talk about that. But I think showing that data went down, or the number of fatalities went down when they allowed lane splitting, because now the rider could get out of the way and kind of move forward and be a little more proactive. I think that may be attributable. The difference too is it takes time, and this is an argument that people make against it all the time, is it takes time for communities to adjust to it. And in California, it's just accepted and embraced and celebrated, I think. And I think the different communities will take time. There's a ton of states trying to look at this. And most of, I think, the resistance is more anecdotal. And I think most of the resistance is probably more to do with people's fears who are driving cars or trucks, rather than anything that's more statistical based, let's say it that way.
You mentioned cars and trucks, and I get what you're saying. Like in California, you drive and you see people move out. You see a motorcyclist in your mirror and you see people make room. Can you think of any benefits for a car driver? I know us riders, we want to stay safe. A lot of people want to get places more quickly, but is there a benefit for people in four-wheeled vehicles, the cagers, as people call them? Is there a benefit to those people, or is it just for the riders?
Well, I think limiting traffic in any way benefits us all, right? I think there's an argument to be made for that, rather than this, all stacking up. Having actually more probably motorcycle riders in general alleviate traffic statistically, and probably overall save us all hundreds of thousands of hours of our lives, throughout a year or a lifetime. So that would be a benefit. Whether in our today's environment with road rage and everything else that we see, whether they can get their brains around that, I don't know. That's a tougher societal issue that I don't know that we're going to figure out today.
Yeah, and there's a valid argument that can be made when it comes to the statistics that come out of Europe and even California, that culturally it is the norm there. People are used to it, and enacting the similar law in a state like Colorado isn't necessarily going to have the same effect, because people here aren't used to a motorcycle buzzing by their window as they're driving down the highway. So there would reasonably be maybe some period of time where people are still adjusting to that. So in some ways, it seems like it can be hard to pull those stats from the places where that law has existed for a long time and apply it to Colorado as if here or any other state for that matter, it's going to be exactly the same as it is in those places, which is part of the reason that Colorado conducting its own study seems important.
Yeah, and I think one of the things that any campaign like this, especially when you're changing laws, whether it's a dead light law, dead light law where you can move, where you don't, you're a motorcycle rider, you're sitting there forever waiting for the light to change, and there's nobody around. Just informing and training the public and teaching the public about what's going on. And I think if it seems like a feasible thing to do in Colorado, then CDOT training with boards and PSAs and other announcements to train the overall, cager public that they need to be aware that this is okay and it's legal. Just like they need to let people know in Colorado that while you're riding your motorcycle, you can go in the HOV lane or the toll lane for free, right? People just need to know these things. And training the public would be the next step. And sometimes these bills get passed with that in mind, is that it's a cost to the public to train, and it will be in the CDOT budget to put out PSAs, to put out the signage, to do commercials and things like that. And I think that's how realistically it would pass in Colorado if it were to.
Is there anything else in particular that you would want to put across for people to know just about this topic in general from your perspective as a motorcycle lawyer and somebody that's deeply involved in legislation around being on two wheels?
Yeah, I think the most important thing is a couple of different things, is that we all need to share the road together, and there's plenty of room for us all, right? When you're get your hands on the handlebar, that's only 3 foot really of space, and there's room for us and for motorcycle riders to move. And I think the most important thing I could say, and I see this all the time with witness statements and cases where we're helping an injured rider, and people mistake sound with speed all the time, and they think a motorcycle rider is just ripping down the road when it's just, the gearing on the bike is higher and the sound is cool. And I think helping get over those sorts of fears would be a big help. If you lane splitted back a mile back, but then you're riding in normal traffic now, it doesn't mean you're a lunatic back there trying to kill yourself. You were just trying to move through the flow of traffic, keep yourself safe. And don't try your best to understand that person doesn't have a death wish. And this is what I see with witness statements over and over again. And it's hard to overcome sometimes. And I think roads, yeah.
Yeah. Well, we really appreciate your input on this because you're much more involved in this area than we are. So being able to have you chime in on this subject just gives a lot more information to this video that otherwise we wouldn't have had. So thank you for your time. I know your days are busy, and that's pretty much all for this video. Let us know what you guys think down in the comments below. There's really not necessarily a right or wrong answer here, but we figured we would chime in on the discussion anyway.
Yeah.
And I appreciate it, guys. I'm a huge fan, obviously, and keep up the good work for all riders across the world. Appreciate it.
Yeah.
Appreciate you, and go check out Scott's website. That's always linked down in the description below. And as always, alltfl.com, where you can find all our content, and tflbids.com too for any vehicle auctions and new purchases you want to go find. Catch you in the next video.